There are messages that aren't long, not particularly special, and yet they make you pause longer than you expected. Not because you're stuck in the past, but maybe because something in you never fully disappeared. Aquarius, if lately you've felt an old emotion quietly returning, not clear, not easy to name, then maybe this isn't just a message. Maybe it's a moment inviting you to look back at yourself and notice you're not who you used to be anymore. There are moments, no warning, no signs, no clear reason, just something very small gently touches you out of nowhere. Maybe it's an ordinary evening, like any other. You're in the middle of something, or maybe just sitting still, letting your thoughts drift without a name. Nothing special, nothing that asks for your attention, until a very soft sound appears. A notification, not loud, not urgent, but enough to make you glance. And then you see it, a name or just a short line of text. But somehow, it doesn't feel like the others. You don't open it right away. Or maybe you do, but you read it more slowly than usual, as if some part of you wants to hold that moment just a little longer. Everything around you seems the same room, the same light, the same you sitting there. But inside, something very subtle begins to shift. Not a clear emotion, not exactly happiness, not quite sadness either. More like a feeling you can't quite name, like walking into a familiar place and realizing something about it is no longer the same. Aquarius, maybe you once believed you had already moved past it, that whatever once touched you deeply had been placed behind you. Somewhere it no longer shaped your present. And most of the time, that feels true. You kept going. You changed. You learned not to let things linger too long. But some feelings don't disappear. They just grow quieter, softer, and settle somewhere deep inside you, not asking for attention, not needing anything, just being there, until something familiar enough, real enough, touches that exact place again. Not to pull you back, not to drag you into the past, but more like a gentle breeze rippling the surface of water that once seemed still, and you realize you can still feel, not the same way, not as intense as before, but enough to make you pause. Not a pause of confusion, but a natural stillness. Like when you find yourself looking a little longer at something you don't fully understand. You might wonder, why now? Or, does this mean anything? But then, you don't rush to answer anymore, because this time, the feeling didn't come to be explained. It came to be noticed, gently, without pressure, without asking anything from you. Just a presence, quiet, real, still. And maybe, what makes this moment meaningful isn't the message itself. It's the way you are experiencing it. You're not who you used to be anymore. You don't react the same way. You don't rush to fill the space with thoughts or actions. You just stay with the feeling. And in that stillness, something very subtle begins to happen. You are learning how to stay closer to yourself, not to understand everything, not to control what you feel, but simply not to turn away from what is already there. And maybe what you're feeling right now isn't just a reaction to a message. It's a quiet reminder that somewhere inside you, there is still a part that is deeply alive, deeply real, and still listening to life in its own way. You know, not everyone from your past can reach you the same way. Life moves on long enough. You meet many people, you connect, you drift apart, and slowly, everything becomes a memory. There are names you once thought mattered deeply, but over time, they grow lighter, fainter, until they're just a story that no longer makes you pause. You can read it again, look back on it, even remember it, but you don't feel anything special anymore, as if it already played its part in your life. And then there are people you don't even need to try to forget. One day, you simply realize you don't remember them clearly anymore, not because they weren't important, but because you've moved beyond the version of yourself that once held onto them. But this person is different. It's not that you think about them often, it's not that you haven't moved forward, it's just that somewhere deep inside, there's something between you that never fully closed, not in an obvious way, No unfinished promises, no clear ending to hold on to, just a sense of something incomplete, like a piece of music that stopped halfway. Not because it ended, but because it was never finished. And even if you don't think about it, sometimes, all it takes is a familiar sound, a passing melody, and you recognize it. Not with your mind, but with a feeling. Aquarius, there are connections in your life that aren't defined by time. They don't need to last. They don't need a name. They don't need to stay. And yet, somehow, they leave a mark. Something quiet, something personal, something hard to replace. And when that person appears again, even if it's just a short message, you don't get pulled into them. You just notice that feeling is still there, not the same as before, not as intense, not something that takes over you anymore, but enough for you to know. It never fully disappeared. And what's interesting is, this time, you don't see them the same way. You don't place them in that special space anymore. You don't wonder what they're thinking or what might happen next. You just quietly notice, I can still feel this. And maybe that says more about you than it does about them. That message doesn't pull you back. It doesn't turn you into who you used to be. It simply opens a small door so you can look at a part of yourself you once lived through. And in that moment, you don't see them clearly. You see yourself in a different time, a different feeling, a version of you that was once very real. Maybe what was unfinished was never the connection itself. Maybe it was the way you experienced it. And now, as it returns, not to continue, not to fix anything, but just to give you a chance to see it again, from a calmer place. You don't need to decide right away. You don't need to understand everything. Just notice this. Not everyone can come back and touch you like that. And if this is happening, maybe it's not a coincidence, not in some grand way, but in a very quiet sense, that there is still a part of you listening. Not to go back, not to begin again, but simply to understand yourself a little more in this moment. And then, after that moment, when you realize a part of you is still listening, something else, very subtle, begins to reveal itself. This time, you don't react the way you used to. There's no rush, no need to immediately understand what's happening, no urge to respond, to explain, to hold on, or to let go right away. You just pause, but not a pause from confusion. A conscious pause, gentle, slow, and wide enough for you to stay with yourself. You read the message again, maybe once, maybe a few times, but each time, you're no longer searching for meaning in every word. You're listening to how you feel. It's not loud. It doesn't rise like it used to. It doesn't pull you into endless thoughts. It comes, stays for a moment, then softens. Like a small wave touching the shore, not strong enough to disturb anything, just enough to remind you the water is still alive. And in that moment, you notice something different. The pain is no longer the same, not because it's gone, not because you've completely moved on, but because the way you are with it has changed. Before, you might have tried to understand everything quickly, to name the feeling, to find reasons, to search for answers, to create a clear ending, as if understanding it fully would make it disappear. But now, you don't need that anymore. You let the feeling exist without rushing to explain it. You allow yourself to feel without judgment, and that is not indifference. It's not coldness. Aquarius, this is what happens when you've gone through enough to realize not every emotion needs to be solved right away. Some things just need to be seen. Some things just need to exist quietly. You're no longer trying to control your experience, no longer trying to make it right or wrong. You simply observe, as if you're standing just outside yourself, watching the current of your emotions flow by, slower, softer, and no longer pulling you away. And in the way you observe, there is a quiet kind of growth, nothing to prove, nothing to show, just a shift you may not even have a name for yet. Maybe you begin to notice. You're not afraid of this feeling anymore. You're not avoiding it. You're not reacting to protect yourself. You're just there, with it. And somehow, it no longer takes over the way it once did. Like water, you're no longer trying to hold. It simply finds a way to move through you without hurting you. Maybe this is what healing can look like, without needing to call it that. Not a moment where everything is fixed, not a place where everything is perfect, but a quiet realization that you can feel and still remain at peace within yourself. And that feeling arrives gently. No clear milestone, no dramatic breakthrough, just one day. You notice you don't react the same way anymore, and you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just stay there, present, honest, with yourself. And maybe, in this very act of not reacting right away, you're giving yourself something you once couldn't, a space wide enough for emotions to pass through you, without losing who you are. And then, as you stop reacting the way you used to, as you grow more familiar with simply pausing and observing, that message begins to reveal itself in a different way. It's no longer something you need to analyze, no longer something you have to fully understand. It just is. Very short, very simple, maybe just a few lines, no decoration, no words that would make others think too much. If someone else saw it, they might not notice anything special, but you can feel there's something behind it. Not clear, not something you can name right away. Just a very subtle feeling, like hearing a familiar sound in a place you didn't expect. Maybe it's hesitation, a quiet uncertainty, hidden between words that seem ordinary. Maybe it's a small kind of courage, not something dramatic, but enough for someone to cross an invisible distance and press send. Or maybe it's simply an attempt. Something very human, very imperfect, very unsure. And what's interesting is, this time, you're not trying to figure out what they're thinking. You don't place yourself in their perspective to decode every word. You don't rush to assign meaning, you just return to yourself. How do I feel reading this? That question doesn't need an answer right away. And maybe it doesn't need a clear answer at all. Because what matters isn't the content of the message. It's the feeling that stays with you after you've read it. The moment you put your phone down. The moment you're no longer looking at the screen. And yet, something is still there. Not loud, not overwhelming. Just a very quiet presence. Like an echo. Like when a song ends, but its melody lingers in your mind a little longer. You don't try to hold on to it. But you don't push it away either. You let it be. And in that silence, you begin to notice something very subtle. Your feelings are no longer shaped by what someone else says. They come from within you. The message is just a touch point, a very small beginning. But what's really happening is the way you're connecting with yourself in that moment. Maybe you feel a little warmth, a little distance, or just a stillness you can't quite explain. There's no right or wrong, no way you're supposed to feel, just something being present. And this time, you don't rush to name it. You don't call it hope. You don't call it regret. You don't call it a beginning or an ending. You let it be what it is. Because maybe not every feeling needs to be defined to matter. And when you allow yourself to feel without needing to understand, you begin to touch a deeper part of who you are. A place where things are no longer limited by words. A place where intuition speaks to you in its own quiet way. Aquarius, maybe you're used to thinking, analyzing, finding logic in everything, and that has served you. But moments like this don't ask for that. They just ask you to listen, not with your mind, but with your feeling. And what's speaking to you now is not the message, it's you, a very quiet part of you, gently reminding you. You don't have to understand everything to feel it. And sometimes, when you slow down enough, you begin to hear what words could never fully say. And then, after you've stayed with your feelings long enough, after you've stopped trying to understand everything right away, something begins to feel clearer. Not clear like an answer, not a final conclusion, but a very gentle realization, like fog slowly lifting, and you begin to see the shape of things, without needing to reach out and touch them. Not everyone who returns comes back to continue. It's a familiar idea, but maybe only when you truly experience it, you begin to understand what it really means. Because before, when something returned, you might have wondered, is this another chance? Is it not over yet? But this time, those questions don't come the same way anymore. You no longer see a return as a door opening. You see it as a moment, a point of contact, something passing through. And in that moment, you're not pulled in. You stay, not because you don't care, but because you no longer need to hold on to anything to feel whole. Aquarius, there are connections in your life that don't need a perfect ending to matter. They come, they go, and they leave behind something real, not for you to hold on to, but for you to grow with. And sometimes, when someone returns, it's not to continue the story between you. It's to let you see that story again, from a different place, a place where you're no longer at the center of the pain, no longer seeing everything through old wounds, but from a space where you can see your whole journey more quietly. You begin to notice how deeply you once felt, how long you waited, how hard you tried to hold on to things that were never truly yours. And then, you see this too. You've changed. Not in a loud way, not in a way others would easily notice. But something inside you has shifted. You don't react the same way. You're no longer pulled into familiar emotions. Things that once hurt you don't reach you the same way anymore. Not because they lost meaning, but because you're no longer standing in the same place where they could hurt you. And in this return, something else quietly happens. You stop looking for them. You stop trying to understand them. You stop asking questions about them. You return to yourself. You notice your feelings. You notice your calm. You notice the quiet distance between who you are now and who you used to be. And in that moment, you don't see them clearly anymore. You see yourself, a version of you that is no longer rushed, no longer easily pulled in, no longer needing an answer from the outside to feel at peace. Just a very quiet you. Maybe this isn't a return meant for a new beginning. Maybe it's a return that allows you to close something within yourself, something you didn't have the chance to before. No explanations needed, no conversations required, just a simple realization. I've come this far, and maybe this is one of the gentlest ways life shows you your own growth, not through something dramatic, but through a single message, and the quiet truth that you're no longer who you used to be when you read it. And then, after everything you've begun to notice, after seeing the difference in how you feel, how you respond, how you pause instead of being pulled in, a very small moment quietly appears. No noise, no clear sign marking its arrival. But if you pay close enough attention, you'll see it. It's the moment you realize you don't have to respond right away. The message is still there, the feeling is still there, but you're no longer driven to do something next. No urge to reply, just to keep the connection. No need to say something to make things clearer. No pressure to close anything just to feel complete. You simply let it be, naturally. And what's different is, this time, you're not uncomfortable with that silence. You don't feel like you're missing something. You don't feel like you're doing something wrong. You're just giving yourself space, a space wide enough for everything to exist without being pushed away or pulled closer. Aquarius, this is not hesitation. This is not avoidance. This is a very subtle awareness that you have the right not to react immediately to everything that touches you. And within that, there is a quiet kind of freedom. You're no longer led by what once happened, no longer reacting through old patterns. The past is still there, but it no longer holds your hand. You begin to listen to the present, not with your mind, but with your feeling. You start to ask yourself, not, what should I do? But, what actually feels right for me in this moment? And that question doesn't need an immediate answer. It only asks for your honesty. Maybe you'll reply. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll continue. Or maybe you'll let it rest there. But what matters is, this time, the choice comes from you. Not from fear, not from habit, not from what you once thought you had to do, but from a very quiet place inside you, where you begin to trust your own feeling. And maybe this is the moment you choose yourself again. No announcement needed, no need to prove anything to anyone. Just a very gentle shift. You no longer place others at the center of your decisions. You place yourself there, not in a selfish way, but in a way where you understand. Only when you stay with yourself can you truly connect with anyone else. Your silence no longer feels the same. It's not a space that needs to be filled, not something that makes you uneasy. It becomes a space, a place where you can slow your breath, feel more clearly, and not be carried away by the rush of the outside world. Maybe others won't understand. Maybe they'll wonder why you didn't respond right away. But you no longer feel the need to explain that. Because this silence is not distance. It is presence. Presence with yourself. Presence with your feelings. Presence with this moment, more fully than before. And maybe this isn't a big decision. Not something the world would notice, just a very small choice, but enough to change how you exist in your own life. A choice where you no longer set yourself aside to chase something outside of you. And in that quiet, something very real begins to grow. A version of you that knows how to pause, how to listen, and knows you always have the right to choose yourself in any moment. And then, after you've given yourself enough space, after you've stopped rushing to react, stopped searching for answers outside of you, something very quiet begins to feel clearer. Not the kind of clarity you can put into words, not a complete thought, but a feeling. Very light, and yet very certain. You may not say it out loud. You may not even try to explain it, but you know. Not the kind of knowing that comes from logic, not from analysis or reasoning, but a recognition from within, like walking into a room and instantly feeling whether you should stay or leave. No reason, no explanation. You just know. Aquarius, maybe you've been used to understanding everything through thought, asking questions, analyzing, searching for meaning, and that has helped you. But moments like this don't work that way anymore. You're not looking for answers. You're sensing direction. Not what you should or shouldn't do. Not what's right or wrong. Just what brings you closer to yourself. Maybe it's not replying right away. Maybe it's keeping things at a gentle distance. Or maybe doing nothing at all. And what's interesting is, the less you try to understand, the more clearly you feel. Not clarity about them, not clarity about the situation, but clarity about you. You begin to notice what lightens you, what weighs you down. No need to name it, no need to explain it to anyone. You just feel it. And as you begin to trust that feeling, gently, without forcing it, you no longer need answers from others. You don't need them to confirm anything. You don't need them to say what you're guessing. You don't need to figure everything out before allowing yourself to feel at peace. You stay there, with your intuition, quietly, without trying to prove anything. Just a silent trust that you can rely on yourself. And maybe this is one of the most subtle changes of all. You're no longer searching for clarity outside. You begin to realize the clarity within you has always been there. You just weren't fully listening before. Maybe intuition doesn't come to give answers. It doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't point to a specific path. It simply keeps you aligned with yourself. And when you are aligned with yourself, everything else becomes simpler. Not because life is easier, but because you're no longer fighting against yourself. Aquarius, you may not say this to anyone. You don't need to share it. You don't need to explain it. But deep inside, you're no longer in the same place you once were. You don't need the same things anymore. You're not pulled by the same emotions. There is just a very real presence of you here in this moment. And when you trust that enough, you begin to realize some answers don't need to be spoken. Some things don't need to be fully understood. And some choices don't need anyone's permission, as long as you feel it's right for you. And that is enough. And then, after everything you've moved through, the feelings that quietly returned, the silence you chose to stay with, the things you understood without needing to name, this story doesn't unfold the way you once imagined. There's no clear climax, no words big enough to change everything, no promises, no ending tied up neatly with a final period. Everything just drifts quietly, the same way it began. And if you look closely, you might begin to notice what matters most isn't where this leads, it's how you move through it, because this time, You're no longer pulled back the way you used to be. No more being caught in the same familiar loop. No more endless thoughts stacking on top of each other. No more questions pushing you to search for answers outside yourself. You still feel. You still notice the subtle things. But you don't lose yourself inside them. You stay. You stay with the feeling, with the silence, with yourself. And that may seem small, something others might not even notice. But to you, it's something real. A quiet kind of change. Aquarius, there are moments in life that don't come to bring something new. They come to reflect back to you how far you've come. A message, a name, a familiar feeling, things that once felt so significant. And yet this time, when you touch them again, they don't feel the same. Not because they've changed, but because you have. You no longer need an answer to feel at ease. You no longer need a clear ending to keep moving forward. You're not searching for meaning in every small detail. You just feel it and let everything rest where it belongs. And in that simplicity, something very gentle begins to happen. You let go, not letting go of a person, not letting go of a memory, but letting go of the way you once held on to it. Letting go of the need to understand everything. Letting go of the urge to control the outcome. Even letting go of expectations you may not have realized you were still carrying. And when you let go in that way, nothing is lost. Instead, a very quiet space opens up. Not a space of emptiness, but a space of freedom. You're no longer pulled back, no longer held in place. You can look ahead, without carrying the weight of what's behind you. Not because the past no longer matters, but because it has already played its role in your journey, and you don't need to stay there anymore. Maybe this isn't an ending, and it's not a beginning either. Just a still point, where you pause, look back, and realize everything has shifted in the most natural way. No force, no effort, just you've moved through it, and maybe that's one of the lightest feelings you can experience, when you no longer need to prove that you've grown. You simply feel it in the way you exist now. Aquarius, some messages don't come to change your life. They don't bring answers. They don't open a clear new chapter. But in a very quiet way, they show you something else. Your life has already changed, and you have too.